International Speaker Series. I want to thank you for coming today. I hope you are doing well. Before we begin the session, let me introduce myself. My name is Elika. I'm working as Project Manager at Recap. It is my pleasure to welcome you today as the host in this webinar session talking about Industry 5.0. I'm very excited because after this, we're going to introduce our inspiring speaker and moderator. In this moment, I would like to thank you, our partners, 1000 Startup Digital and ICT Ministry of Indonesia as our strategic partners, Kumpul as our community partner, Zillion as our media partner, and also Selaksa as our event partner. This project will not be able to run without our partners' support. We are very delighted to have you here in Insight Speaker Series, which will be held bi-weekly with several topics around business, finance, marketing, and technology. As our current situation affected by COVID-19, many businesses and startups have been adjusting and maintaining their business both in short and long-term action to survive the situation. That is the reason this webinar series is made, to help the government to support startups and businesses to survive and thrive in COVID-19 situation. The knowledge and experience will be delivered by international speakers and moderator from top-notch companies to share their perspective in business. Today, in this session, we will learn about types and impact of technology development in business, as well as how Industry 5.0 has revolutionized human workforce. Before we start, I'm going to explain the agenda for today. So after participant check-in, we have an opening and introduction as what we already have now. After that, we're going to have a presentation from Joe Vasquez, our speaker. He is a venture partner at Travel Partners and Innovation Consultant. And then we're going to have Q&A session, which will be facilitated by our moderator, Jazamin Raza. If you have any question regarding our topic during the presentation, you don't have to wait until the end of our presentation. You can just write it on Q&A chat box in Zoom, and then we will go through it later on Q&A session. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator for today's session. She is the head of Digital Program and Strategic Partnership under the Business Digital Adoption Division in Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation, or MDEC. Her 20 years of experience in digital content has brought her into various sectors such as government agency, internet services, and entertainment. She is responsible to find ways for local SMEs to adopt digital while working closely with World Economic Forum to embrace fourth industrial revolution. She is Jazamin Raza. Thank you for sparing your time to be able to facilitate our discussion today. Hello, Jazamin.
Hello, hi. Thank you, Elika. So, terima kasih Elika, terima kasih kepada Recap yang sudi mengundang saya pada malam ini. Selamat malam pada semua yang hadir. Terima kasih kerana bergabung dengan kami pada malam ini di sesi Insight the International Speaker Series. I just wanted to give a test on my bahasa Indonesia. So anyway.
It's very good.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jasmine, as what Elika has introduced. I'm your moderator for this evening. Thank you so much, Elika, for having me here. Thank you for your time as well. A little bit of background why I'm here and the interest of this topic is because, as what Elika has mentioned, that I am attached to Malaysian Digital Economy, or MDEC for short. And what we do, we are actually a government agency advising the government on digital economy and technology moving forward for the country. So I lead the Digital Program and Strategic Partnership in the Business Digital Adoption Division. So I am also working closely with the World Economic Forum at the moment, and the project that we're looking into right now is how to accelerate Malaysia in embracing fourth industry revolution. So that's the reason why I agreed to be the moderator for this evening, because it's something that I want to learn more about the Industry 5.0. So we're shifting for fourth industry revolution to Industry 5.0, right? So we heard so much about the fourth industry revolution. So what can we learn tonight about the Industry 5.0 from none other than Joe Vasquez? Hi, Joe. So today, you're going to share with us a topic, a glimpse into the future workforce and Industry 5.0, right? So Joe, I mean, I've looked at your CV. You're a venture partner at Real Partners, an angel investor, advisor, innovation consultant, and recently a director at Runway Innovation. And not forgetting Forbes 30 Under 30. It's just so amazing to see what you've done so far. And I'm pretty sure everyone is, you know, very, very excited and to hear what you have in store for us tonight or this evening. So, you know, I'm not going to take too much time. So, Joe, the stage is all yours.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I feel like you do a better introduction for me than I do for myself. So I really appreciate that. I'm going to share my screen really quickly, and hopefully you should be able to see my screen. Can everyone see it okay? Great. So one really interesting feature or functionality for Google Slides or Google presentations is closed captions. So if you go to the bottom, you could actually click this closed caption button, and what will happen is, using artificial intelligence, Google has a cloud platform that transcribes your audio into text, allowing more people to understand and connect with what you're saying. And I want to call this out. This is one small part of the Industry 5.0. Industry 5.0 is about being inclusive to everyone on the spectrum. People that have different learning abilities, people who have different or maybe disabilities or different functional abilities, etc. So the goal of the Industry 5.0 is, how can we build an economy that is functionally driven by technology and people at the same time? We are not trying to replace humans. We're trying to find and build technologies that work together with humans, but not just a small part, everyone. My name is Joe Vasquez, and I am a venture partner at Revel Partners, which is a $50 million B2B SaaS fund based out of New York City. I'm also deaf and hard of hearing. So because I'm deaf and hard of hearing, it's allowed me to empathize and connect with more people. But it also makes it important that I have subtitles and captions on the bottom of my screen. Today, I'll just go through a quick introduction to my background, who I am, where I'm from, what I do. I'll talk about the different types of industrial revolutions. What is the Industrial Revolution 1.0 all the way to 5.0? What are the major trends in the future of work? Now, the way I see it is, Industry 5.0 is this big bucket of technology, people, processes, politics, all of it. And within that, there's the future of work, which is where a lot of today's presentation is going to focus on. How do we work? Where do we work? What type of work? And why do we do it? And then we could talk a little bit about, how can we make people happy at work? Interesting fact, about 50% of entrepreneurs, startup founders, or people who work in technology suffer from some type of mental health disorder like depression, bipolar, etc. There needs to be a lot more work done to ensure that people are happy with what they do. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some ways that you can make your employees happy, or you could be more happy at work yourself. And then we'll do about 30 minutes of Q&A like Elika was talking about before. So quick background, venture partner at Revel Partners, a $50 million B2B SaaS fund based out of New York. I'm an innovation consultant. I work with companies like Visa, CBUSA, Uruguay, Santander, and others to help them with innovation strategy, corporate venture capital, etc. I was a Forbes 30 Under 30 recipient and an early co-founder of StartX. And StartX is a startup accelerator based out of Stanford University, where I went to undergrad. It's one of the top 10 startup accelerators in the United States right now. So first, a little history. Industry 1.0, or the first industrial revolution, was called mechanization. And this was around the 1780s. It's when cotton was started to be basically milled using machines. And historically, in the prior to 1780s, cotton was, the seeds were actually being pulled out by hand. And they created something called the cotton mill, and that was one of the first evolutions of the Industrial Revolution. Then in the 1870s, we had electrification. And that is where Thomas Edison had really brought more popularity to the idea of electricity. And Henry T. Ford started really popularizing cars and the assembly line. The 1970s, we started talking about automation. How can we automate using smarter computers or smarter technologies? This is where things start to get interesting. 3.5 is when we had a breakdown in the idea of borders, where offshoring of production to low-cost economies, where you could have a developer in a third world country working on your technology or some variation of that. So now companies are starting to remove the idea of physical national borders. Today, we have connected devices, data analytics, artificial intelligence. But what is Industry 5.0? Industry 5.0 is the future. It's personalization. It's this cooperation between man and machine. It's the idea that computers are able to respond and personalize and create the great experiences for each individual user based on all of the data that they have about them. So we'll talk about things like cobots. What's the difference between a robot and a cobot? A cobot is a collaborative robot. It responds to what the human is doing. Elon Musk recently said that humans are very underrated. Humans are so important for Industry 5.0. So I want to make it clear, we're not trying to replace humans. We're just trying to augment what they can already do. Here are some of the big words that you might see when we're talking about the Industry 5.0. We might talk about things like work-life balance. We might talk about things like wellness, automation, artificial intelligence, building design, augmentation, cloud platforms. All of these words are critical to talking about Industry 5.0. One thing that is becoming increasingly clear, as we get more and more technology, there is a bigger and bigger difference between those who have resources and those who don't. So programs like RECAP are doing a great job at educating and bringing people into the fold when it comes to technology. But we all need to be cognizant. Big companies have a lot of power, and with that comes a lot of responsibility. Companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon have a lot of impact on how we live. Look at politics in America. An ads-driven social networking type business like Facebook has an incentive, as you'll see in the movie Social Dilemma, an incentive to sell as many ads as possible. But how can we do that in a responsible way that doesn't further divide our society? We need to be talking about things like universal basic income. In a world where there's less and less jobs due to automation, how do we create a stable economy where everyone can live, everyone can thrive, and everyone can be happy? So I want to talk about some of the major technology areas. And to go back, the last slide, I was talking about the big key themes, the big words that you might hear: universal basic income, work-life balance, technology, artificial intelligence, etc. Here are what I consider the 8 major technology areas, and I'll go into some of them in a bit. So the first is artificial intelligence and big data. collecting as much information as possible from as many users as possible to create personalized experiences and to respond most effectively to the user. The second bucket is augmented and virtual reality. Augmented reality and virtual reality are very similar and also very different. They all fit underneath the umbrella of what we call mixed reality. So we have our real reality, we have augmented reality, where we layer information on top of our real reality, and then virtual reality. Autonomous robots and drones. And I mentioned this before, something called a cobot, which is a collaborative robot. We'll talk a little bit about industrial IoT. Now, industrial IoT is leveraging sensors and sensor-related technology to communicate what exactly is happening inside of our factories, in the field, on a farm 100 miles away. How can we get sensor information and actually respond to that meaningfully? But the interesting thing about industrial IoT is that historically, it was very easy to hack and created a lot of problems from a security perspective. So we'll talk a little bit about cybersecurity and what that means. Horizontal and vertical integration. Horizontal and vertical integration might sound like a lot of words, but really what it means is we're bringing all of our information together. So the sales team, the human resources team, the manufacturing team, customer data, all of it is being brought together in one seamless and unified place to create the most meaningful and actionable insights for companies to grow and scale. We'll talk a little bit about cloud and edge systems, quantum compute. Just a quick overview, cloud computing is anything that is being done in the cloud. The cloud is just a fancy way of saying computer servers somewhere physically remote. Edge systems are anything that is closer to the user. An edge system might be a compute tower that is located down the street. It might be a server that I have in my house, or it could be a computer that I have right in front of me. The idea of quantum compute. Now, quantum compute is effectively a new technology that allows us to do high-level, incredibly fast computation at 50, 100, 1,000 times the speed of computers today. Now, that actually poses a lot of interesting questions. Sure, we're able to do a lot of computations much quicker, much more efficiently, and we're slowly getting there where this technology is accessible for people. But does that give us a potential security risk? We'll talk a little bit about blockchain. Many of you have heard about blockchain or used blockchain in some way, shape, or form. Blockchain is a form of encryption and a multi-ledger technology. But because the encryption is based on some type of mathematics, quantum computing can actually solve a lot of those problems, posing a security risk for blockchain. We'll talk about additive manufacturing and 3D printing. Additive manufacturing and 3D printing are very similar. They come from the same type of technology. Effectively, you're layering different types of polymers or different types of materials on top of each other to create a new product. 3D printing is great for small batch, iterative, MVP type products. You can produce 50, 100, maybe a little bit more of a product to test it out with your customers. You could also use it to create a new screw or a new type of product in your house that instead of going to the store, you might be able to 3D print it. And then finally, cybersecurity and blockchain. I've been talking quite a bit about blockchain and cybersecurity. Ultimately, more of our information about us is going to be stored somewhere in the cloud. Our preferences, what we like to do, what we like to eat, our favorite store, how we like to learn, all of this information is going to be captured somewhere. But there's more and more risk that comes with that. So we need to be thinking critically about cybersecurity, blockchain, and the policies that come with our data. Maybe there will be ways to monetize our data. If it's our data in the first place, so why are companies like Google, Facebook, etc., making so much money off of it, but we're not getting anything from it? So I'm going to start talking about 4 different types of technology buckets. The first is augmented reality. Augmented and virtual reality are all under the umbrella of what I call mixed reality. Over here on the left, we have the real environment. The real environment is what you have every day. All the way to the right is the virtual environment. And everything in between, we have augmented reality and we have augmented virtuality. Augmented reality means that you are layering information on top of the existing reality. Virtual reality is completely self-contained. It might have something called foveation. Foveation is simply eye tracking inside of the virtual reality screen. Foveation is interesting because it allows us to create unique experiences based on where your eye is inside of the virtual reality screen. Like I mentioned before, mixed reality is a continuum of all of those realities put together. So what are the benefits of AR? You have real-time contextual information. If you see over here, on the right side of my screen, this gentleman is working on an engine or a motor. He is seeing information about the motor, what's wrong with it, how to fix it, what this piece is, or whatever. This is having real-time contextual information layered on top of that real reality. It allows you to improve decision-making. Instead of just using your brain to make a decision, now you can rely on computers and other specialists who might know something better than you. And it allows you to ultimately enhance precision. So factories and companies will reduce the amount of errors that they make. Let's go back to the next one. The next one that I want to talk about is cybersecurity and blockchain. Blockchain is effectively a library of information that we simply copied hundreds and thousands of times. So it's impossible to change all of that information. For example, if I give Elika $5, usually there's no way to trace or find out that information. But with blockchain, Jasmine would have a record that I gave Elika $5. Elika would have a record that says that I gave Elika $5. And I would also have a record that says I gave Elika $5. We all have a copy of the same record of information. I can't change that. I can't change anybody else's records. It is an immutable record or a chain of information. This is really important because it allows us to have more transparency. We don't need a bank or some third party to verify that that information or that transaction actually happened. And I'm not going to get too into it, but there's something called a smart contract. A smart contract is effectively some type of contract built on top of the blockchain. For example, if I have a contract that says, I completed XYZ presentation or XYZ task. If I mowed my front lawn, for example, the contract will confirm that I mowed my front lawn. Somebody will have to verify that, and my mom will give me $5. Now you could have really interesting contracts, artificial intelligence, and really unique use cases on top of blockchain. And cybersecurity plays a very big role in this conversation. Now, for cybersecurity more broadly, I think there's going to be a lot more standard communication protocols, especially when it comes to IoT. We're going to have more well-defined industrial systems, so on-site data access. What does that actually mean? Who can access the data? How can they access that data? When can they access that data? We'll be able to track where specific data packets are. Historically, if you had information on a server, you had no way of determining who is accessing that data. What are they doing with it? Are they selling it? You have no way of tracking that. Another interesting thing that I'm very excited about is sophisticated identity management. We have things like biometrics. Biometrics is simply using biological markers on our bodies to determine if our identity is true or not. A common one is the fingerprint. Another very common one is the pupil. There are many different features of our bodies that we can use for identity management. But one thing that is the next iteration of that is called behavioral identity. Behavioral identity is tracking your behavior over time to determine, are you doing anything malicious with this data? Are you doing anything bad or good? For example, if you see that Paul is downloading a file once per week, and then 1 week he downloads 2,000 files, there might be something suspicious here. So using behavioral management and behavioral identity management to create more security and safety within your company. Another one that I'm very excited about is called horizontal and vertical integration. Like I mentioned before, it's a cohesive system integration, bringing your value chain, your customer information, your enterprise information, your CRM, your ERP, your data analytics, and your manufacturing systems all together to create the most value for your customers. Historically, companies like Oracle, SAP, large enterprise players were able to do stuff like this. But now, information technology teams within small companies are able to piece together and do this relatively easily. You have platforms like Salesforce, you have ClickFunnels, you have so many different types of CRMs, ERPs that really integrate and work together nicely. An extension of that is, now that we have all of this information together, how do we leverage artificial intelligence and big data to create that personalized user experience for all of our customers? Maybe we can, based on what we know about customers, use 3D printing to create one-of-a-kind products for each individual customer. A good friend of mine, his name is Bon Bo. He was the former chief marketing officer of the company that makes Oreo's cookies. A lot of you might know Oreo's cookies. It's one of my favorite cookies out there. And the Oreo cookie has not really changed over the years. They have different colors, maybe for Christmas. They have different sizes. I believe it's called the double stuff, which is a little bit more cream filling. But they decided to use 3D printing to create completely custom Oreo cookies for each individual user. So now I could have a cookie with my face on it or my name on it. This is one way that we could use artificial intelligence, big data, and 3D printing all together to create these personalized experiences for consumers. Hey, now I love Oreo cookies even more. So artificial intelligence and big data is about bringing this connection of sensors and networks, computing and data on demand, layering it with cybersecurity for models and memory, You get context. Where are you? What is the weather like today? All of this contextual information to create meaning and correlation. You're allowed to, with Industry 5.0, to create a community of data scientists and technologists to share and collaborate on that data. And then finally, this customization that I was talking about before, personalization and creating more value for each individual user. So the next section is I'll be talking about specifically the future of work. Now, to take a step back, Industry 5.0 is this overarching trend. More technology, more artificial intelligence, more cybersecurity, and more personalization. But what does this mean in a world of work? What does this mean for you, for me, for all of us in terms of how we operate, how we pursue our passion, and how we live our lives every day? So I'm going to look at the participants panel. And some of you should be able to respond with a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I'm going to put a quick prompt up there. And if you agree, give me a thumbs up. If you disagree, give me a thumbs down. So the first is, work takes place only in a factory or an office, not at home. So let's go back here. Great. So work does not need to take place in an office or a factory. It can take place at home. I'm currently at home with my family right now, and using Zoom, I'm able to work virtually. You must measure time spent at work to ensure productivity. People are only productive when you measure exactly how many hours they work. It doesn't matter if you're just sitting there for 8 hours, you're still productive. Most people would give this a thumbs down. The future of work is going to be focused on productivity, not time. They're two very different things. Some people are able to accomplish the same amount, but in significantly less time. So how do we build a future of work that's focused on productivity, but not just time? There's only one way to perform a job. Most people would give this a thumbs down. In the future of work, or the more creative work economy, there's a lot of different types of tools, methods, and ways of working. As long as you're being productive, it doesn't really matter how you perform a job. Bosses and managers are starting to give a lot more flexibility and autonomy to their employees in the future of work. Humans are simply organizational resources to be managed. I would say most people would disagree with this. Humans are the lifeblood and contribute to the culture of a company. We need to be thinking about them as people. We need to be thinking about them as part of our community, our tribe. And once we celebrate each individual human, we'll have a much more effective and happy company. People are only motivated to earn money. I would say most people would give this a big thumbs down. People are realizing that there is much more to life than simply making money. Once you have your basic needs met, people want to start thinking about things like passion, purpose, and what is the meaning of their life. When we're spending 40 hours a week, we want to know that we're spending our time well. Companies like Tesla, for example, a very well-known electric car manufacturer based out of California, does a great job of focusing on two things. Focusing on creating great cars for people, focusing on creating a great sustainable company, and focusing finally on doing a positive and good thing for the environment. Companies are realizing that you can do good and do well financially at the same time. This is a part of Industry 5.0. And finally, rule number 6, leadership is equal to planning, organizing, commanding, and controlling. I think most people would disagree with us. Leadership is about building meaningful connection with your employees and inspiring them to a vision of where you want to be in the future. It's about getting everyone excited about what you're doing as a company and working together to achieve that. This is a picture of factory workers from the early 1900s in the United States. But really, the demands of employees in the workplace have changed because technology has changed, societal norms have changed, psychological insights have changed, and fundamentally, the world of work has changed. Here are 3 big quotes that I want to use to frame the rest of the conversation. We have about 10, 15 minutes left of this conversation. So allocation of work activities will be altered, with work being unbundled and rebundled. So what does that mean? Instead of having one job where you're doing one thing all day or a series of tasks, now your work will be distributed to different people all over the world. You might be working on one task one day, a different task the other day. How do we build companies that are responsive to those changing needs of your customers and employees internally? The second one is interesting. The organizational setup will change with a strong shift towards cross-functional and team-based work and an emphasis on agility. Historically, companies would take 3, 4, 5 years to change their employee or organizational structure. By the time they do that, it would be too late. Other startups are coming up faster. In fact, I believe it is about 50% of Global 2000 or Fortune 1000 companies will be replaced in the next 15 years. And that is because large corporations oftentimes move too slow. They have too much hierarchy or too much politics, or they are beholden to stockholders that they're not able to move quickly and have this level of agility that they need. And 61% of executives for Fortune or Global 2000 companies or larger companies expect to hire more temporary employees. So what does that mean? I can now have a team of consultants for McKinsey, Bain, or whatever, and rely heavily on third-party talent or outsourced contractors in any part of the world. Now, this begs the question, what does that mean for the future of security? What does that mean for our data, our processes, and how do we actually work and collaborate? Now, I want to ask everyone a question here. We have a monkey, we have a penguin, an elephant, a fish, a seal, and a dog. The man at the desk asks, for a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. The monkey obviously would win. The monkey knows how to climb trees. It's always climbed trees. It was probably born in a tree. The elephant might not do a good job climbing the tree. And the fish certainly would not be able to climb the tree. The reason why I show this graphic is simple. Everybody has different skills, different interests, different propensities. How can we build a future of work that is responsive to the skills and the needs and the goals of each individual person? Everybody doesn't need to climb a tree. How can we use their skills more effectively in the future of work. I'm going to share 4 major trends and 4 ways that you can take advantage of the future of work, and then we'll move into the questions and answers. So what are the trends and opportunities? One thing I've been noticing is that there are outdated adult educational models. In the United States specifically, we have $1.7 trillion of student debt in the United States. 40% of students are underemployed, even if they have a degree. It might mean they're working part-time or they're not employed at all. Fundamentally, there is a disconnect between the education system and what employers actually want and need. We need to do a lot more to think about the connection between education and work. The second trend is there's an increasing pace of change and need for retraining. So even if you go to high school, even if you go to secondary, post-secondary, undergraduate, or your master's program, 40% of people will need to retrain or re-educate in 50 years. Skills are half as valuable every 5 years. So there's obviously an imbalance in several professions. There's a high demand or high need for nurses and medical professionals, but in other industries, there's too much talent and not enough jobs. So we need to think critically about who are we educating, how are we educating, and why are we educating them? And finally, another interesting trend I'm really excited about is a very dynamic and changing workforce. There's more self-employment. There's more people that have their own companies like myself. There's freelancers, there's more demand for agency. Agency is the idea that you have control of your life. There's more demand for fulfillment and happiness. How can we be happy and work at the same time? I'll talk about that in a little bit. We just talked about the major trends. These are things that are happening in the past. What are some opportunities for ways that you could build companies in the future? I see a huge opportunity to build more tools for independent and remote workers, for people that are working all over the world. Second, I'm going to see, or have been seeing, corporates providing education to their employees internally and advising them on their career as well. How can you help Joe or Paul or Mary or anybody else within your company to feel like they're growing and they're doing better than they were? How can you educate them without having them go to or leaving your company and going back to school? Third is something called just-in-time education, lifelong learning, and new funding models. New funding models is very interesting to me. There's something called an income share agreement. An income share agreement is basically saying this: if you graduate from my education program, you only have to pay me back if you get a job. If you get a job, you have to give me 5, 10, maybe 15% of your salary for 4 years to pay me back. What this does is it creates better incentives and a stronger connection between the industry and education. Now, my incentive is to help you find the best job possible. I need to make sure that I'm educating you as well as I can so that you can get that job. If I don't do my job well, I don't get paid. And fourth, I'm very excited about the idea of micro-credentials and certificates. Instead of simply having a degree from Stanford University, which is great, maybe I'll have a degree and underneath it, all of my individual skills that I got from Stanford University. For example, basic computer science, venture capital analytics, economics, or whatever other skills there might be. But having a diploma or a degree doesn't really tell you a lot of information about what skills I might have. And finally, how can we boost happiness? This is the last slide before we move on to questions and answers. It's incredibly important that we think about happiness and wellness at work. 50% of entrepreneurs suffer from depression or some type of mental health illness. And this number is only going up. Especially in the time of COVID, more remote workers are feeling disconnected, detached from their peers. They're feeling underappreciated and undervalued. So how can we create a work environment where people are happy, collaborative, and working together? So here are 3 quick ways. Encourage more collaborative working. In Zoom, you have breakout functionalities. That's another or unique way to get people working together. There are tools like Mural. Mural is one of my favorite tools. It is a digital whiteboard where you could share and collaborate on information in real time. You can use gamification. I see a lot of companies are using gamification for sales. Sales where you might have a leaderboard and some type of collaborative way of working together. Maybe Peter and Paul got 5 points for reaching out to 100 customers and they got XYZ reward. And you create this culture of celebrating one another. Third is allowing people to use personal tools at work, using personal devices instead of a company mandated device. This is actually has a pretty profound impact because it allows people to feel like they have more control over their life and they feel more comfortable with it. But that does pose a potential security risk. Let's look at the next 3. Accurately identifying fit, gaps in knowledge, and meaningful intervention. There's a lot of amazing HR, human resources, technology companies that analyze not just the skill sets, but the personality profiles of all of the people and what they need, what type of feedback. For example, I love direct and critical feedback because that helps me to improve more effectively. But some people maybe need a little bit different feedback. So how do we create a work environment that's based on that information? Easy methods for recognition. How do we celebrate and recognize people for the great work that they do? And creating more learning and upskilling opportunities. Maybe giving free credits for masterclass or Skillshare or Coursera, or maybe creating a community internally within your company where people educate one another. I hope you learned something helpful. And I talked about a lot of different tools, a lot of different trends, and a lot of different technologies. I'm incredibly excited about the Industry 5.0 and about the future of work, because it takes all of us to work together to make an inclusive economy work for everyone, not just a few. So now we're going to move into questions and answers. And thank you again for listening to today's presentation.
Hi, I'm back. Thank you, Joe. Yes, we're going to some of the questions from the audience. We've got a few here from Firdausi Firdaus. But let's start with one. The first one, which he asked, when is Industry 5.0 will start? Now, I have something similar question as well, because I think the story here is that many countries in Southeast Asia, right, is still at the infancy stage with regards to the Industry 4.0. So now we're talking about Industry 5.0. So do we actually have a phase? So you start with you start with Industry 4.0 and then you move to Industry 5.0, or does it go hand in hand, parallel? What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And um, it's really interesting that in Silicon Valley, Industry 5.0 is kind of the term that we use every day because everything is personalized more and more. You walk into a store, and some stores in San Francisco have facial recognition technology, and it knows your name before you even walk into the store. But in other parts of the world, that might happen in 15, 20 years or so. So there's definitely an imbalance, and some countries are further behind and some countries are ahead of the curve. But I think they will happen in parallel. You're correct. So digitization, which is Industry 4.0, and personalization, which is Industry 5.0, are going to happen hand in hand. But because the technology is being developed so rapidly, I think that developing countries are going to catch up very quickly. Part of the problem is that compute or personalization requires a lot of computing technology and computing capabilities. With that, you need to have devices that can handle that level of compute. So you have an i5 Pentium chip from Intel, which has amazing compute capabilities, but it's very expensive. So a lot of developing countries, the phones might be from 5 or 10 years ago. It might not be able to handle that compute capability. So I really do think that they're going to happen in parallel. And I think developing countries are going to catch up very quickly over the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Okay, yeah, I think so too. But if we were to look into, again, coming back to Southeast Asia, right? What is the first area of technology which we should look into to move into this in parallel? I know you've showed a lot. So yeah, which one should we prioritize first?
Yeah, so one of the areas I'm quite excited about is 5G. And you have 3G, you have 4G, you have 5G in terms of connectivity. And the nice thing about having 5G level connectivity is that 5G connectivity offboards the amount of demand on your device. So you could actually do all of the personalization of the compute in the cloud and send personalized messages to someone's phone or laptop. So with 5G connectivity, it allows us to create that personalization without needing so much of the devices. I'm really excited about that. Let's see, another area that I'm very excited about is virtual reality as well. And virtual reality is very interesting from the perspective of education, jobs training, gaming, and also social networking. I think that the future of community will involve some element of virtual reality. How can we see our friends and family members simply sitting in our living room and stay connected and happy? So I'm really excited about that.
Sounds exciting and scary at the same time.
It does, right?
Yeah.
It does.
Okay. Another question from Firdaus is, this is also very interesting. What kind of law are we expected to have in Industry 5.0 compared to the to Industry 4.0? Because we have so much of a connection between human and machine. So what kind of, I guess, high level law that you think we expect to see, or we need to look into actually?
Yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah, I know.
there's so much that's happening there, right?
Yeah.
One thing is, data. So ultimately the question of your data is really important. So when you use your computer, Facebook, Google, etc., are collecting all of this information about you, what your preferences are, what you like to do, how you spend your time, even what you say. But the question is, whose data is that?
Yeah.
Is it really Facebook or Google that owns that data, or is it you? So I think over the next 5, 10 years, we're going to have a very critical question around who owns that data, Why do they own that data? Who can make money off of it? So that's one interesting policy area that I'm really excited about. Specifically with healthcare. Healthcare in the United States, we have something called HIPAA, which is a Privacy Protection Act for patients and hospitals. It makes it really difficult for technology companies to personalize healthcare based on your information. So I think we'll start to see more industry-specific policies as well as broader policies. Whose data is it? Why can you use this data? Where can you use it? But within each industry, like healthcare, robotics, energy, et cetera, will have more specific sub-policies to ensure, privacy and security.
Yeah, I think so too, especially on data and healthcare. Even here in Malaysia, we're having a bit of a, debate on data as well as healthcare policy. Not too sure in Indonesia what's the landscape is like with regards to these two policies. If anybody would.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, okay, no one say that. All right, let me check. Okay, let's see. Any other questions from the floor? Or else I have a couple more questions for Joe.
Sure. I have my cup of coffee, so I'm good to go.
So you're good to go. All right. So you did mention about Industry 4.0, about productivity. So do you agree that Industry 4.0 is about finding the optimal balance of efficiency and productivity? So you touched a little bit on that, right? And perhaps you could elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that maybe taking a little bit of a step back towards education, because education is such a big part of the future of work. Education historically is measured in terms of how much time you spend in your seat in the classroom. You maybe take a test to you maybe take a test or an exam to verify that you know this information. But what I'm seeing is the future of education is going to be from this. Time is fixed and learning is variable. What does that mean? You spend 8 hours in your seat every day. Some students learn all of the information. Some, maybe they don't learn any information at all, but they're still moving along. The future of education is going to look like this. Learning is fixed and time is variable. So everyone has to learn the same amount of information. Some people simply learn it faster. Some people learn it a little bit slower. I think by having this mindset in the education system will transfer very well to the future of work. So now people are not just measured in terms of how many hours they sit in the workplace, but how productive they are. So now people can accomplish the same level of work in 20 hours and maybe get a manager level job. Maybe they can move up quicker, or maybe they simply just have to work 20 hours per week. So that dynamic of time, and we're just trading our time for money, will be productivity for money, and productivity for passion and purpose and all of that. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, it does. We still have another question from Firdaus. He's asking again about law. Should there be a reform of labor law?
Labor law, sure. Yeah. There's a ton of labor law, sure. Yeah. I can't speak, specifically, to Southeast Asia, but in the United States, there are quite a few labor laws that have been enacted since the first industrial revolution. We have, child protection laws, child labor laws. Historically, 12, 13, 14, even younger, 14-year-olds were working in factories for 60, 70, 80 hours a week under terrible conditions with little food, little water for little pet. So we started implementing a lot of policies to make sure that that doesn't happen. Then we started to have something called a minimum wage. A minimum wage is basically, the least amount of money that you could pay someone per hour to work. So we started having all of these different policies. I do think that two I'm very excited about is we're going to basically move the standard work week from 40 hours, so basically 5 days at 8 hours per day, to 4 days at 8 hours per day. So now the work week will get increasingly shorter, and we'll have more time to spend with our family, friends, and doing things that we're excited about. I'm also really excited about something called universal basic income. Many of you have heard of universal basic income, but UBI for short, universal basic income, is the idea that everybody, even if they do not have a job, will get a minimum amount of money every month to ensure that they can live, to ensure that they could put food on the table, to ensure that they could have a cup of coffee in the morning and not worry about where their next meal is going to come from. Unfortunately, the reality of technology is such that wealth is getting increasingly concentrated in such a small percentage of the population.
Yep.
In the United States, the top 0.1% control 90% of the wealth in America. In other parts of the world, this is increasingly common, and it's happening because of technology. So we need to think about what is the future of work, money, productivity, so we can all live and simply be happy.
Thank you. Yeah, you also touched on the universal basic income, which was one of the questions as well. We've got a question from Adwinsar Praditya. What kind of jobs that will be sought after in Industrial Revolution 5.0?
Great question. So, the way I historically see it is, we have the left brain and we have the right brain, right? So we're basically creative, and we're also able to do quantitative type work. So higher level thinking, creativity, thinking about problem solving. And then we have this math part of our brain where we're able to do computations quickly, able to estimate the size of something, to do 2 times 5, 3 plus 6, all of that. So we have our left and right brain. Now, machines are very good at doing the same thing over and over again, or doing calculation very quickly, taking in sensor information and kind of giving us a little bit of a measurement of what's happening. So I think that humans will be able to do the creative problem-solving type work and work with machines much more effectively. So if I was getting educated, or if I was going back to school, I would focus on jobs that really focus more on that creative part of the brain. So maybe product management, design thinking, creativity, leadership, the soft skills. Because at the end of the day, if you can't connect with other human beings and you can't inspire them, collaborate, do some type of project management type work, then it's really hard for the machines to work with you.
That's very interesting to know that we, as human, we go back to our creative side and let the machine do all the technology part, the calculation part of it. Yeah, so next question from...
I feel like you're very good at that.
Nurfatin Haji Ismat, how do we know that we are ready for Industry 5.0? How can we prepare, especially ourselves, or even the government in the country, for that change? Let's take one at a time. So how do we prepare ourselves personally?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one thing is our mindset. And I feel like, the only way that we can adapt to the future world is that we need to have this internal mindset that we are capable of doing whatever we want to do. We just have to set our mind to it and set a plan and make something happen. I think a lot of people hold themselves back from accomplishing what they want to because maybe they didn't have people around them telling them that they can do it. Maybe they heard other people saying that we can't do it. But everyone on this presentation and everyone attending today is here for a reason, because you want to learn. And I think that's such an important thing to celebrate. So congratulations for being here. You're on the first step towards creating and living in the Industry 5.0. So continuously learning, creating community of peers, networking with other people, and building meaningful relationships is going to allow you to prepare and be ready for the Industry 5.0. Now, from the government perspective, the government can do quite a few different things. They can invest in education, making it cheaper and easier for their students or the community to learn. Second, investing in startups and creating a stronger digital economy, which is what Jasmine does. And third is creating a stronger sense of community and a global community. It is incumbent, extremely important for governments to build relationships globally so that employees have opportunities to work everywhere. We find it time and time again that countries with heavy levels of nationalism, the idea that they need to be independent and alone, we find that they oftentimes tend to fail. We need more globalization. We need more connection amongst economies, more connections amongst countries. And it's really important that governments do that.
Actually, that's a very interesting point, that we need more globalization in terms of the government thinking of getting, rather than working in silo, so to speak, right? Yeah. Let's see. Alika, do we have, how much more time do we have? Can I take a few more questions?
Yes, we still have 7 minutes for Q&A.
Oh, 7 minutes. Okay. Okay, we've got an anonymous attendee here who is asking, would it be possible if technology developed that human power would not longer be required? Would it be possible?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Would it be possible if technology developed whereby human power would no longer be required? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely different parts of our lives where, humans won't be needed anymore. For example, self-driving cars. I fundamentally believe that self-driving cars at some point in the future, in the next 10 years or so, will allow us to get from point A to B without any human intervention possible, or any human intervention needed. In factories, we're starting to see machines or robots that are able to produce products much more quickly without human intervention. But like I mentioned before, the creative part of work and life is very difficult for machines to replace that. That's why humans are so special. We're able to think about problems creatively from different perspectives and bring information together. I don't think that machines will be able to replicate that anytime soon. So it really depends on what part of life and work we're talking about.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay, we got one more question. How do you think, or how do you think, which country has implemented this Industry 5.0 concept? Okay, I think the question is, how do you think which country has implemented this Industry 5.0 concept fully and successfully? I don't think anyone has actually implemented it fully, right? It's an ongoing process. But perhaps, yeah, perhaps you could share a little bit on what's happening in the Valley, because you mentioned that there are restaurants or shops that actually have facial recognition. I've been to Valley a couple years back, and I did see some of these, but I haven't been there for some time. So perhaps you can share that experience with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, No, to your point, I don't think any country really has, nailed industry 4.0 or even industry 5.0, well yet. I think there are some countries that do things better than others. For example, a lot of European economies have social infrastructure that allows and makes it so that everyone has the basic needs met, like healthcare, education, and basic finances. In the United States, we don't really have that. Um, but in the United States, we have private systems, so private healthcare, private technology, everything is privatized, which is problematic. In Silicon Valley specifically, I do. Let's see. It is kind of surreal the amount of technology that we have. I mean, you could walk into a restaurant, it knows who you are. You can obviously order a car with your phone using Uber, but now sometimes you'll get a self-driving car in the streets of San Francisco. Um, I really do think it's problematic too. I mean, if you walk around in Silicon Valley or San Francisco, we have a lot of homeless people. So I think there needs to be a conversation around how can we include everyone in that future economy. And unfortunately, I don't think we're doing a good job of that in San Francisco, and I wish we were. Um, am I excited about the Industry 5.0? For sure, but we need to have more inclusive leadership, like all of us here are really thinking about that. So there's definitely a long way to go, but I'm very optimistic about what the future looks like.
So it's great that you touched on the homeless, because I remember there were so many in San Francisco itself, so how can we deal with poverty, with regards to, how can Industry 4.0 help in dealing in this situation, this problem?
Yeah. Well, I feel like this is a conversation that we can, have all day.
Yeah.
One of the first things that comes to mind is that in society, we oftentimes treat symptoms. We're never treating the root cause of what actually is causing poverty in the first place. For example, with poverty, we notice that a lot of people in poverty have mental health or drug issues. But we're not really addressing the fact, why do they have mental health or drug issues? And more often than not, they grew up in a home where their parents had no money. Maybe there was only one parent at home. They had a terrible education system. They had to worry about food, and they were surrounded by crime every day. If you were born and raised in an environment like that, it's very likely that you're going to end up with mental health issues or drug issues in the first place. So we really need to change the conversation from just addressing symptoms and really focusing on root causes as well. So I think that is a little bit longer term, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, but that is what sustainable change looks like. It's how do we change the system and not just the outcomes? So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it does. So I guess that ends the last question.
Sure.
Time you have, yeah. So, okay. So in a nutshell, what we have learned today, or what I've gathered, is that Industry 5.0 is all about being inclusive to everyone, yeah? And it's not there to replace human, but we're supposed to work together harmoniously, humans and machine. And the only way we can do this is to look into education, looking into the creative side, whereby those are the areas which machines are not able to take over. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? Yeah. So, of course, there will be change in jobs. Certain jobs will no longer exist for human. However, there's still more jobs in the future in other areas.
Good.
Yeah. So with that, I hand this over to Elika.
Thank you, Jasmine. Okay. I want to say thank you to Joe and Jamin for the lecture as well as the interesting discussion regarding technology development and the impact on business and human workforce. Hopefully it can be beneficial for everyone. Unfortunately, we have limited time and the time is up for today. But if you have questions that has not been answered and you want to connect with Joe and Jamin, you can connect with them through LinkedIn. Now, before we close this event, I will invite Joe to deliver his closing remarks. Please, Joe.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alika, for hosting me. Thank you, Recap, and thank you particularly to all of the attendees today for joining today's conversation. And thank you to Jasmine for moderating and helping facilitate and really asking critical and thoughtful questions. And I really love the way that you summarized Industry 4.0 and 5.0 at the end, because it's probably, everything condensed down into 30 seconds. You did. I'm really optimistic and excited about where the world is going. And I think it really takes all of us thinking about us collectively as a community. And I'm really excited to work with all of you. If I can be helpful, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always on there. So looking forward to staying connected. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. We're so glad to learn about Industry 5.0 from you and Jamin today. And for everyone who wants to know more about our next webinar and community, you can find it on our social media that is already written in the chat box. We will be more than excited if you want to join our next webinar. And for the details, we will update it on our social media. So stay tuned. Also, it will mean so much for this webinar if you fill out the polling at the end of our session so we can improve the quality of our next webinar. Furthermore, we also have an online group discussion in Telegram named Insight Community. In Insight Community, we will have weekly discussion with experts through group chat in Telegram, covering several topics around business, finance, technology, and marketing. We are open to anyone who is interested in business and entrepreneurship from the expert. The objective of this online group discussion is to expose members' business knowledge and experience to achieve their goals through discussion. For anyone who is interested to join Insight Community, we have sent the link in the chat box. We hope to see you there. Thank you again for everyone that has joined and stayed until the end of the session. I would like to thank again our speaker, Joe, and our moderator, Jamin.
I would like to say thank you to the participants and to Joe. I did not manage to say thank you just now. Yeah, thank you to everyone.
You're welcome, Jamin. Also, I would like to thank our partner, 1000 Startup Digital, ICT Ministry of Indonesia, Kumpul, Zillion, and also Selaksa. We cannot make this webinar happen without your support. And I think we arrived at the end of our session. Thank you very much, Joe and Jamin, for today's discussion. Hopefully, we can meet again in the future. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope we will see you again in our next webinar.